This is CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge & Company. My friend and colleague Doug Muzzio is a professor of public affairs at Baruch College, the part of the City University of New York. And of course, he's the host of City Talk. He's definitely what I would call a political junkie, and we're going to talk politics today. So welcome.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Ronnie.
I know,
Come on,
you love it.
let's get into it.
All right, one of your fields is polling.
Yes.
Now, I really want to know just how is a poll taken?
Well, there's lots of ways to do it. The way most media operations do it, the political polling is you do a random digit dial telephone survey. You get a sample from a company. You get the person on the phone, and you try to find out. You try to randomize it within the household. So you ask, who had their most recent birthday? Is that person there? If that person's there, you talk to them. If not, say, I'll call back. So let's say you get them. Then you ask them a series of questions. That data then gets aggregated, and then you sit down and analyze it. It's, you know,
So those are the polls that we hear, CNN poll or
Yep,
this
that's almost
Washington Post.
all polls do that.
So they do it, I mean, in all these states, and we have cable television, and they're always have to say something, right? They have to fill up the time.
That's right.
So we hear these polls. Sometimes they're totally, I think, contradictory.
Sometimes it happens that polls really produce different results. Number one, polls are only accurate for the moment that they're taken. They're snapshots. They're not motion pictures. Also, it depends on your sampling frame, who you got, when you did it. There's all kinds of variables involved in this. So it's complicated. It's got to be done rigorously.
Right, and often. How often does it get
done?
Well,
it depends on the operation. If you're a media operation, when I worked at ABC, we might do it during the primaries, every primary. During the general election, it's periodic, a couple of weeks, and then if there's a major news event.
So nationally, I mean, how often, you see a poll in Ohio, you see a poll in Florida, in Colorado. How often are they doing those? You think one company is doing one at least every other
Well,
week?
I mean, there are firms that are constantly doing polling, and not only private businesses, but universities. Quinnipiac in New York, for example, does polls throughout the country. Marist does polls. So sometimes you'll get, hell week with polls, that you're just inundated with polls, and then you look at the results and say, what? What are these polls saying? They look contradictory. But oftentimes there are explanations for it, and good, legitimate explanations.
And how much do you think they affect the actual election?
I think they affect it in a number of ways. Number one, they affect how the media portrays campaigns and elections and candidates. It influences campaign contributors in terms of money. It influences the candidates themselves, how they think about themselves, how they behave strategically, and it influences their staffs. I've been in citywide and statewide and national. If you get a lousy poll, it's a downer. So there's a multiplicity of impacts that a poll may play, both negatively and positively.
So is that right? I mean, if we're looking for really fair campaigns, do you think is it manipulating?
It can be manipulated, but I think it's a fundamentally necessary source of information if done rigorously and appropriately.
For whom, though?
You're getting, well, I think
for
all of us. I think for all of us, less the candidates, less the media, but for all of us to see how we understand this particular race and what we're thinking. And also, it tells candidates and elected officials, this is what we're thinking, do it.
Yeah. Well,
So I think there's a real legit, well, I mean, but this is my job, so of course I'm going to defend it.
That's true, I guess. Out of the same poll, you can take voter attitudes and everything.
Absolutely.
It all comes out of the same poll.
You can find out any number of things. You find out their demographic characteristics, their socioeconomic characteristics, and their attitudes and beliefs and opinions on a broad range of issues.
So have we gotten national figures? Do you know who can? Well, we have. I've seen them, but I don't remember who's liberal, who's considers themselves conservative?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of the polls will ask how the respondent describes their political ideology. So yes, a good political poll will include self-description of ideology, party affiliation, all of that stuff.
Do you have a question about the validity of the uncommitted person?
Well, I mean, clearly the quote-unquote independent person is of great interest because they determine the outcome of elections. It depends how you define independent. And there are, you know, self-characterizations are important, but a good poll will try to get at what that exactly means.
And will they ever cross-check that with an enrollment book?
Generally, no. Almost all media and university polls do not use voter registration lists. They use this random digit dial. Some campaigns use registration files because they're polling for different reasons.
Wouldn't it be interesting to know, though, how many people are actually enrolled as a Democrat or as a Republican or as a liberal or as a working party in New York and not...
Well, I mean, you can get the aggregate numbers. You just can't match what a person says with what the actual voter registration is. And basically, you ask, are you currently registered at the address at which you are now living? That's essentially the question.
I see. So that traces the history.
That's right. It's all self-described.
So, how do you think, what's going to happen in this national?
Nice. How can you ask me such a question?
Well, what's the latest poll?
Well, the latest poll that I read, I guess this morning showed, one of the polling firms showed it was a virtual dead heat. So, and it's been bouncing around. You've got volatility because people really haven't really paid attention and haven't been really engaged yet. That happens later on. Much later. And you know, you'll see volatility as both the opinion changes and also as various polling operations conduct their research.
Right. I mean, I always sort of cringe when they say it's going to be a very close election because I'm totally transferring my feelings into the
well, I mean, you can't help it. I mean, you read it and you say, oh, no, my candidate's behind. How can this be?
How many people could vote for him?
That's well, I mean, that's the universal. I mean, that
you must be kidding.
You know, there's 50% of the public voting for that fool.
You know, I worked at CBS when they had the election that was the first election to really publicly use
Exit poll.
Computer.
Oh, with computer? You're old.
Univac.
Holy
I am
mackerel.
old.
I watched that on television. I was a kid. No, you're not. No, I'm sorry.
I am old. I admit it.
No, let's not get it.
I'm an elder. I'm not even elder. I try to stay young. All right.
No, that's a digression.
But the Univac took up 2 rooms.
I know.
They spent months trying to fill an equation to feed into the machine and then fill in the results.
Yep.
And then everybody running the machine was pro-Stevenson. So as the figures came in pro-Eisenhower, they started fiddling around. So that's what happened.
Yeah, but you can't fiddle around with you can't fiddle around with this results. Witness all the vote thievery and suppression that we have. So, my first election was in 1980 with ABC and was an exit poll. And every time the data came in, the machines went down and we had to read it by hand. So, you know, come on. It was crazy.
We've really progressed.
I guess.
So and you've been around for a while. I mean, you're not as old as I am, but you've been around.
But I'm getting Medicare soon.
Oh, good
so,
for you.
Come on.
It's nice. It's something that you have to really protect, this Medicare. Have you ever seen an election like this? With so much polarization?
I have to tell you, I mean,
I don't mean in New York.
I mean, you know, we both lived through Vietnam. We both lived through the dissensus and conflict about the Vietnam War. But I have to tell you, I am less sanguine about the prospects of the country now than I've been at any time in my life. It just seems that we are totally fractured, deep chasms, and they're almost irreducible, unbridgeable. And I've got a certain partisan and ideological preference. The Republican candidates, all of them, including the nominee, scare me. You have candidates who don't believe in evolution, but believe in secession. I mean, come on.
Yeah, it is. And the interpretation of the Constitution, I don't think has ever been interpreted that widely this way.
Excuse me, look at the Supreme Court, the way they interpret the Constitution. They become the most activist judges in my memory. It makes the Warren Court look like slowpoke. Absolutely. I mean, there's a tremendous level of hypocrisy here on the part of the court and its defenders.
Well, don't you think there's a tremendous level of hypocrisy all around?
Well, I mean, hypocrisy is, you know, a fundamental reality, but come on. I mean, this is a hypocrisy cubed.
It is. So do you think it's going to be a really close election?
Who knows? There's so many intervening days. I mean, you know as well as I do, a day is an eternity in politics. A week is a couple, and months is even more. External events, you know, skeletons falling out of closets. You know, there's so many imponderables. You just don't know.
Also, when was the last? Well, I guess we have had elections where the question of personality and charisma was a very present one.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
or the lack of charisma in the case of
Clinton,
Kerry.
Dole.
Right, Clinton, Dole. But I mean, you know, a lack of charisma with Kerry, for example,
Yeah.
on the Democratic side, sure. And then McCain didn't have charisma either.
Right. So, all right. So we don't know what's going to happen.
We don't know what's going to happen.
But it's really interesting.
Yeah,
it is interesting.
Oh, it's endlessly. Not only is it fascinating, it's determinative of our future. It's going to tell us where we are and who we are as a people. So come on, it's the big time. It's the most important thing that we can do.
Do you think we're going to overcome all the restrictions on voting?
Meaning the attempts to limit voting by individuals. I mean, clearly there is a Republican attempt to minimize the voting of what might be Democratic-leaning constituencies. Come on, it's you know, it's the way politics has been played forever. You maximize your number of voters, you minimize the other guy's voters, and if you have to, you change the rules to limit their voters.
But do you? I think it's a great opportunity for the what they call the grassroots, for the grassroots campaign of Obama to really organize itself better.
Well, I have to tell you, I mean, there's a lot of strategic issues about the campaign that relate to the substance of governing. A lot of the enthusiasm, the idealism that was manifested in 2008, and this belief that the millennials were somehow different, it hasn't happened. This has been an administration that's disappointed a lot of its supporters, and in some measure because of the obstinacy of the Republican Party that refused to accommodate him at all. But you got to say that he is vulnerable. Certainly, looking at the poll numbers, Obama can be beaten. Will he? We don't know.
But, you know, we don't know how the registration of young people is going to be. And the young people of 4 years ago are now older voters.
But don't forget, the young are the least likely to vote.
I don't agree with you now with the tuition business and everything else, and the
but,
jobs.
Yeah, but we've been saying that since the 1970s when
I know, I'm always
1970s
optimistic.
when the 18-year-olds got the right to vote and said, well, McGovern's going to win, and the new vote is split between Nixon and McGovern.
Right.
So
you're right.
I'm not young anymore,
All right,
so I don't
right.
trust them.
So
don't trust anybody under 30.
So in New York, the congressional redistricting,
Yeah.
we're going to lose what, 2 seats?
Yeah, we go from 29 to 27.
Right. What do you think about all these older incumbents continuing to run? I mean, I love Louise Slaughter. She's 80 years old.
Right. And she's got a real challenge
And
with
a big
Maggie
fight.
Brooks.
And now she's broken her leg, so that's
I
even
know.
harder.
Well, I mean, talking about health and all, Charlie Rangel. I mean,
Rangel.
Charlie's been around.
And he's lost.
DC.
The argument for Louise is that she has a very powerful committee.
Right.
But the argument for Charlie is not that anymore.
No.
And Louise is no longer the chair, so
That's
it
right.
doesn't matter
That's
either.
right. She's the minority.
So that thing that we used to say, oh, they're more effective for New York, so we have to keep the seniority. It's really not there. And I think our system, especially in New York, has not been welcoming to younger people, new people.
Well, I mean, the institutions tend not to be welcoming to outsiders and new people. And when one of the problems with the Democratic machines locally is that they didn't welcome the new immigrants.
But and they're also not machines anymore.
Well, and if they are, they're broken.
Right. So I don't know. Look at Charlie Rangel. He's got the district is different.
District is very different. It's a much more Latino-oriented district moving into the Bronx. So you've got Espaillat, Adriano Espaillat, a Dominican state legislator challenging him. Charlie's older. He's in frail health. He's had issues with his taxes, losing the chairmanship of Ways and Means. he's ripe to be challenged. The question is there a Latino vote, and will they vote as a bloc and therefore vote for Espaillat? There were two other candidates in the race, but the main focus has been obviously on Rangel and on Espaillat.
Espaillat's a ferocious fighter.
Oh yeah, well Charlie is too. I mean,
yeah,
you know,
he is.
Charlie, you know,
and he's certainly got the roots there.
he's got the political chops, and also just going back to the military in Korea, Charlie's got the chops.
But he won also by defeating an incumbent that was very well known.
That's right, and also had his difficulties, Adam Clayton Powell.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. So the city I mean, the government in New York is going to have a big change in next year's election.
Yeah, well,
new mayor,
several ways.
Yeah,
you're going to have a new mayor, new citywides, and
two borough presidents new. Queens and New
York. Helen Marshall's been around forever.
Right.
Marty's gone, Helen's gone, Molinaro's gone. Stringer's going to move up. The only one who's really set is
from the Bronx.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Ruben Diaz Jr. in the Bronx. So you're going to have great turnover at the citywide level, the borough-wide level, and you've got substantial turnover in the city council because of term limits. So it's not as dramatic as it was in 2001, the first year that the original term limits went into effect, but it's going to have profound consequences.
It certainly is.
And it's going to be redistricted, too. Don't forget, we just went through this crazy state redistricting.
It hasn't been redistricted
No, it
yet.
hasn't, but it will be prior to the 2000.
It'll also be a new
new speaker. So you've got different districts, different per people.
And weakened county leaders.
Weakened county leaders,
But
yes.
Queens
And is that a bad thing or a good thing?
We don't know. Well, you know, I mean, come on. I don't think it's such a good thing.
Oh, no, I know. I was trying to be balanced, generally speaking. I mean, I think we would be better off without them, particularly, I mean, not talking about specific individuals, which we could go into and get a lawsuit probably, but just the position itself and the power that it holds.
Well, it dictates who the committee should be.
Oh, well, it dictates who the speaker is, and therefore some of the
standing committees.
The committees, sure.
So it's a big thing. So what's going to happen?
What do you mean,
I
what's
mean,
going to
here
happen?
we have the Republicans trying to run Ray Kelly. He's not going to run, do you think?
You know what? Ray has said that running wasn't in his DNA, and I believe it. I think Ray's a cop and a good cop. Does he want to subject himself to the craziness of political campaign? I don't think so. I think he's a sane man, and sane people don't run for office, present company accepted.
What do you mean by that?
Well, that you're a sane person who ran.
Oh, I see. Oh, I got it. I'm sorry.
I
remember. I was busy thinking about Arthur Goldberg years ago.
Wait a minute. Don't tell me. The 1970 gubernatorial election against Nelson Rockefeller, worst candidate in human history.
Absolutely.
They should have put his campaign speeches at the sleep aid section of the local pharmacy.
He was talking to different people, and I was working for John Lindsay, and Lindsay sent me, along with a guy named an Assemblyman Al Blumenthal, who came from the West Side, famous, and a lawyer named Justin Feldman. And the three of us met with Garth Goldberg. And we said, what do you want this for? You know, why are you thinking of doing this? You know, he'd been a Supreme Court justice, a big union, I mean, anyway, everything, secretary of something. And why do you want this? And shortly after we left, he had a press conference and he announced he wasn't running.
The question
but then he
led him
changed
to
his
an
mind.
analysis, but then he reached. He should have stuck with his decision not to run.
So it is it tickles your ego, and it makes you really think I could have the world, but you shouldn't do it.
Excuse me, it is an extraordinarily difficult thing to campaign. You know how it is. I mean, the money,
well, it's
the
not
time,
only that,
the effort.
It's how you think and how you.
Oh, right. Well, irrespective of all.
And all your past behavior. I mean,
yeah,
I don't
all of
think
those felonies that you committed as a youth, you don't want it on the front page of the Post.
Yeah, but I think he's really a micromanager, but he's had this rigid structure that he's been able to run. I'm talking about Kelly now.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think Bloomberg demonstrated the fact that you can be successful in business and be a successful mayor. I mean, I still don't think that Bloomberg gets an very average, but it's a different kind of average. I don't think he relates to the community.
Oh, well, excuse me.
And that's a very important role.
Excuse me. He doesn't feel your pain and doesn't want to.
Right.
Over and over again, he's demonstrated that. But in terms of my assessment of Bloomberg, he's done some substantial things. the crime rate has been reduced.
Well, there's a great question also about this, right?
Right, but you know, a lot of the numbers, you know, you can question, you know, Mark Twain's lies, damn lies, and statistics. The thing that I guess annoys me personally most about Bloomberg is that this feeling like he's the philosopher king, that he knows what's best, that being rich allows you to somehow determine the public interest and act on it. I ain't buying it. I ain't buying it. So it may be more personal style than some of the substance of what he's done, some of which has been admittedly substantial.
What do we say about the Department of Education?
I say lies, dim lies, and statistics. I mean, you know, they ran Klein and Bloomberg ran on a third term on these great improvements on the test scores, and everybody knew that the test scores were bogus. That the state tests were just bogus. They were, you know, they lowered the passing rates. They made them easier. It was just awful.
But you're a professor, and I guess you can see the result of this. But I was always brought up to think that it was. What's most important is to learn how to think and to how to look at something and analyze it and figure out what you're going to do,
right,
rather than studying for a test all the time.
Well, don't start me. I mean, we could do an hour on this one where, you know, I'll rant and rave and bloviate for an hour.
Right.
That kind of emphasis on tests is a mistake because you have to teach to the test. Are you teaching test taking, or are you teaching, as you suggest, critical thinking and content? There's a real problem with the over-reliance with tests, but the bottom line is you need tests. You need some way to assess.
To find out whether people
students improved, where they're going, to evaluate teachers. But the way the debate has been framed, the argument's been framed, I think has really been counterproductive. Much more heat than light on the issue.
And third graders worrying about having to go take a test? Oh, please,
third graders, fifth grade, you know,
it's
every
so
grade.
Yeah.
And it's not only in New York City. I mean, I live in a suburban New Jersey district. I was a school board member. They've got state tests that are doing the same thing. So this phenomenon is certainly not unique to New York State. It is, or New York City, or New York State.
Right.
It is national. It's a national argument.
And have you ever figured out whether you think the charter schools are good or are they automatically bad? What is it?
It's a mixed bag, but my concern is, as a public school, or was a public school parent, that they will take resources away from the traditional public schools, if in fact it can be demonstrated that they are clearly superior, which is certainly not been the case that I've seen in the studies. Not that they're inferior, but not, you know, it's a mixed bag. So if I could be convinced that the money and the effort is worth it in terms of educational performance for general students as well as particularly minority group students, yeah, do it.
Isn't it like when I went to school, we had a rapid class?
Yeah.
Isn't it very similar to that?
No, in fact, because it's institutionally different. It operates.
You mean they don't take them separately and
right? It's
give them
a different set of rules. It's a different set of hiring practices. It's different structurally and in terms of process than sort of your advanced classes when you and I went to school. My wife, for example, graduated high school at 16 because she was accelerated through 2 years of school. I mean, that's a different phenomenon.
Yeah. All right. Now let's just go back to the police thing. There's an interesting comparison about the number of hospital emergency room visits due to assaults and the number of assaults.
Ah, well, see, now you're in the area of...
Are we going to get into
now
this?
You're in the area of lies, damn lies, and statistics in terms of police data. There have been a number of studies by criminologists, mainly from John Jay, that suggest that what you've had is a pressure from CompStat to produce certain types of numbers and eliminate other types of numbers. And what this has done is that this has distorted our understanding of what's going on and also had profound effect on procedure. Do the numbers in some sense reflect reality? Graham Raymond of the Village Voice and Rocco Parandascola of the News have demonstrated that there are whistleblowers out there who have taped commanders saying, you know, downgrade this, have a quota for that. Now, the police department denies it. Clearly, it's happened. The question is, what is the extent of this, and what is the impact on policing, and the impact of, therefore, on policing on the citizens of the city of New York?
So you know a really wide range of things. How do you learn all this, and how do you spend all your time?
Oh, God. I spend my time doing two things. I spend my time being a junkie, as you describe me. And the other thing is I spend an awful lot of time with my family, grandchildren, children, etc. But I get out of bed at 4:30, 5 o'clock, hit the computer, you know, go to empirepage.com, City and State First Read, Gotham Gazette. So in the first hour, what I do is I scan all the relevant local, state, and national news, so I get a sense of what's going on. And then during the course of the day, I supplement that. I get calls from reporters. It's my life.
And do you read papers anymore?
Yes, I do read the papers. After I go through the electronic versions and actually leave the house to go somewhere, I pick up the Times, the News, the Post, and sometimes the Wall Street Journal. So I supplement my online reading with, I love the physical feel of the paper.
And how many classes do you teach?
I teach basically 4 classes a year because I've got administrative leave because I work in the Baruch Survey Research Center and I do other things. But I love my teaching. I teach undergraduates, I teach graduates at Baruch, I teach at the journalism school, I teach at Macaulay Honors College. I got the life. If anybody wants the life, they should become a college professor.
Why didn't you ever run for public office?
I did. I ran for school board twice and won the first time an overwhelming victory against an entrenched group of right-wing Republican. I won't use the expletive, and the second time I had scared them enough that they didn't run anybody against us. And I self-term limited myself to 2 terms.
Right.
And I've been tempted and asked to run for
local
public office, town council. Or I don't want to.
Yeah.
I like my life. I don't need more aggravation. That's aggravating.
And in a funny kind of way, you could be almost more helpful. You're more effective outside.
To a certain extent,
depends.
yes.
It depends what position you're in.
Yeah, exactly. What position you hold and what influence you ultimately have.
Well, if I lived in your town, I would really like to see you be the head of the town.
Oh, man. Holy smokes. Can I use this clip for an advertisement?
Absolutely.
No, but they want to know who the hell is Ronnie Eldridge.
Well, we'll have to tell them that another time.
Okay.
Thanks, Doug Muzzio, and I hope
We're
you'll come
done?
back again. And I think we should do some more talking and more specifically about elections later on this year.
Oh, are you kidding me? Absolutely.
Okay.
You and me.
It's a deal.
We're done?
Yes.
Oh, God.
Thank you.
Really had good time.
Right.
Thank you.
If there are any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.